Hello and welcome to Cover to Credits, the bi-weekly podcast where we discuss books and their movie adaptations. I'm Ian George.
And I'm Adina Hilton. In this episode, we'll be discussing Inherent Vice. Inherent Vice was written by Thomas Pynchon and published in 2009.
And the film adaptation was directed by Paul Thomas Anderson and came out in 2014.
And we are excited!
We get to talk about Thomas Pynchon
and P.T. Anderson.
Although I shouldn't talk, I'm not like a crazy Pynchon fan or anything,
No.
But
I feel like as someone who likes books, you kind of have to appreciate people that are almost like cult-like. You know, James Joyce, David Foster Wallace, Thomas Pynchon is in there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't really like to read their books, but I'm always like, when I do, I always feel proud of myself. And I'm like, hey, I read Ulysses, no big deal. Like,
yeah, I felt proud getting through this book. Not that it was like tough to get through.
Yeah.
But it's kind of such a weird... kind of like romp of a book. It's tough to explain. Mm-hmm. Like, it's very dense and kind of weird and trippy and kind of crazy. And, you know, it was a book that was tough to kind of read quickly through.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you mentioned that when you were reading it, that you kept having to sort of like backtrack a bit.
Yeah, like if my brain wandered for any second, I was kind of like, wait, what am I... Because there's a lot of detail and description in this book and references to like pop culture and music and things like that, and like discussions that have kind of no purpose in a way.
Yeah.
But that's like the meat of the book. That's like 80% of the book and why you're reading it. You know what I mean? So sometimes when you skim it too quickly, you're like, wait.
Missing what the point of it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So for this book and movie setup, Ian read the book, and I just watched the movie. So we're kind of doing something a little different. We did this with A Walk to Remember and Big Little Lies, kind of switching off the reading. But so we knew that Inherent Vice would kind of be a little bit challenging. It's this detective noir story set in LA in the 1970s. And it kind of like, the plot is just totally out there. Really hard to follow. So we almost kind of wanted to see like, what would it be like for me to just watch the movie without reading the book? Could I follow along? How would it, seem to me to just have just the movie impression?
Yeah, because I read the book first. I read the book and watched the movie like a few years ago.
Yeah.
And so, I saw the movie after reading the book, which gives a lot of additional context because the movie is it's a very accurate movie.
Yeah.
When it can be, like, they have to cut some parts out and then kind of like abridge those parts in some ways.
Because the book is too long.
Yeah. And so having read the book, it helped to make some of those connections that maybe the movie kind of skims over faster. Mm-hmm. So I was curious whether you would like it or not, or would just be lost and like not liking it at all.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's get into it.
Mm-hmm. So the story takes place Los Angeles, 1970, at Gordita Beach, which is a fictional beach, I believe, in the novel. But all of LA is like set up. They talk about Venice and San Antonio and like all these areas that people would probably be familiar with.
Yeah.
And it's so much of the book is the setting. Yes. Both time and location.
Mm-hmm. You really like feel like you're getting a sense of, that cusp of the end of the 1960s going into the 70s, and also this place, this beach town where Doc, the main character, lives, versus all these other places that he goes in LA and the different flavors of the city. So
yeah, and a noir detective story is perfect for kind of getting a feel, because so much of these stories are like the character just kind of going from one place to another, meeting one person and another person, and kind of just giving you this smattering of a time and place. So this is kind of a great story type to experience, this location. And it starts off with the main character, Doc, who is a private investigator in Los Angeles and kind of a hippie burnout.
Yes.
And
smokes weed all the time. Everyone is always like, Doc, you're high, right? And he's like, maybe.
I maybe smoked a joint or two. And it's interesting because he's such a heavy user and smoker that he honestly becomes kind of an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, because he's kind of got what they say is doper's memory, where he just has a really shitty memory.
Yeah.
Which is not good for a private investigator.
And so he like does drugs, but the drug that he does not use is heroin.
Yeah.
Which is like important to the story because there's a lot of heroin users, but Doc is strictly weed and coke and acid.
Yeah. The book talks somewhat about like these acid trips he's been on and does go on in the book, and they are out there. They're super goofy, but it's really funny. So the book starts off with him and his old girlfriend Shasta comes into it's a classic detective story. Like he's not in his office, but essentially he's at his home, and like this old flame comes back into his life
to stir up some trouble.
Pretty much.
Yeah, so she asked him for help, and the movie kind of lets you know that, you know, it's been a while since he's seen Shasta, and she looks really different. Like, she looks all fancy and kind of modish, you know, her clothing. And she kind of says that she's with this guy now who's this big hotshot real estate guy. And she's getting herself kind of into this plot that she's feeling over her head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she explains that Mickey Wolfman, who's the guy she's seeing, the real estate developer, his wife is planning on putting him in a loony bin.
Yeah.
As you know, is what they frequently refer to it as.
Getting him committed somehow.
Yeah, whether through legal means or not. And the wife has a boyfriend who is scheming with them. Because Mickey Wolfman has Shasta on the side, so it's this really kind of...
And they want Shasta to be involved in the situation, but Shasta doesn't know if she wants to be, and so she's kind of... It's unclear exactly what she's asking Doc.
Yeah.
You know, she's not like, help me get out of it, but she's also kind of like, I don't really want to be in this. And then she just sort of takes off and is like, okay.
Yeah, and... Doc is kind of he agrees to help her and is kind of immediately set into this roller coaster of
the wheels are in
story.
motion.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about noir now?
Yeah. So I really love modern detective noir stories.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because this is kind of why I became interested in the movie at first, because I saw the trailer for this movie and I knew Paul Thomas Anderson was directing it, and I was like, oh man, a kind of a goofy comedy detective noir story in the 70s. And then I heard it was a book, and I'm like, oh man, I should buy the book. So I immediately went out and bought it. But I love the genre and the tropes of it.
Yeah. And
I'm not super well versed in like the classic black and white detective noir stories, but more like kind of the modern imaginings of it.
Yeah.
So I really love Brick, Rian Johnson's Brick, or Winter's Bone, or Blade Runner's in there.
Yeah.
Big Lebowski's probably one of my favorites that is actually a detective noir story. And Chinatown, of course. And, LA is a big kind of recurring theme in a lot of detective stories.
Yeah, I heard that actually a lot of people were comparing this movie to The Big Lebowski, or kind of like thought that it would be more like The Big Lebowski, and then watched it and were like, wait, this is not what I wanted.
Yeah, I honestly, that's kind of what I thought too when I first saw the trailer.
Yeah,
it seems like
it had that vibe.
Yeah, it's a pot smoking kind of doofus in over his head in this huge crazy
in LA.
Yeah. But it's way more I don't know, kind of mixed in its the feel of it than just a comedy.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, they really Paul Thomas Anderson, the director, for anyone who's not familiar with him, directed Boogie Nights, Punch Drunk Love, There Will Be Blood, The Master. And this is his first kind of comedy since Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah.
Before this was The Master, and then There Will Be Blood. And so he's kind of been on this
drama. Yeah,
this really intense kind of drama kick for 10 years now or so.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of interesting to see him return to a comedic script and everything. But I guess he's wanted to direct a Pynchon novel for a while now.
Yeah, so he is a big fan of Thomas Pynchon, and he was previously looking at some of his other works, one of them, Vineland, I think. But he was like, it's impossible. And filmmakers have kind of said that it's impossible to translate Thomas Pynchon's books to the screen. They were kind of like, there's no way we can do it. But once Inherent Vice, the movie rights were being sold, Paul Thomas Anderson was like, I have to do it. I have to try.
Yeah.
And he said like some quote like, if anyone's going to fuck it up, like I want to be the one that fucks it up.
Yeah. He felt like he felt the need to be the one to adapt this.
Yeah.
Since it was his most adaptable book apparently to date.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's really cool to talk about like this really well-known author and this really well-known director
teaming up.
Yeah, and kind of this collaboration and what came out of it.
Well, what's super interesting too is Thomas Pynchon is like notoriously reclusive. So, there's hasn't been like any photographs of him since like the 50s. And, he doesn't talk to journalists or the news or anyone. He just likes his privacy, which is fine. Like he has a right to that. But it's super interesting to see him work with a director in something as public as a movie.
Yeah.
To kind of, he's involved with it, or was involved at least enough to give his blessing to this film. So
yeah, there were kind of varying reports on like apparently Joaquin Phoenix kind of said that P.T. Anderson was talking to him a lot and they were working on the script a lot. And then P.T. Anderson kind of said that's not really true. So
yeah, and then Josh Brolin said that there was a cameo of Thomas Pynchon in the movie, but then the director was like, no, that might not be true. And it's just like, there's a lot of mystery around it.
They're kind of just shoveling coal into the fire that is like this
mystery.
the
conspiracy about Thomas Pynchon. They're like, we don't know.
Who knows anything?
Yeah, so back to the story. Doc wants to figure out what's going on with this Mickey Wolfman guy, real estate dude. Mm-hmm. So he heads over to one of his real estate developments.
Yes, where he knows he'll be, he wants to kind of like run into him to get to talk to him.
Yeah.
But he also knows that he's surrounded by, he has a gang kind of, of bodyguards who are neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre because Mickey Wolfman is apparently Jewish or part Jewish. So this is kind of a weird ongoing thing, a recurring theme in this. But so Doc goes there. And at this real estate development, they kind of have some businesses set up for people to go to. And one of them is a massage parlor.
Yeah. / brothel.
Yeah. So he goes in there. He meets two of the girls, Jade and Bambi. Mm-hmm. And while he's kind of looking around investigating, in the book, it's interesting. He just kind of has a blackout.
Really?
Yeah. And he's never positive what happens.
Okay.
In the movie, though, the audience clearly sees someone
knock him out,
batons him over the head and knocks him out.
Yeah, and when he wakes up, he's lying next to a dead man, which is one of Marty Wolfman's bodyguards, one of the neo-Nazi bodyguards.
Mickey Wolfman.
Oh, did I say Marty Wolfman? God damn it. I keep saying Marty instead of Mickey. I don't know why.
We knew this would happen.
I knew this would happen. I'm sorry. I apologize. So Mickey Wolfman's bodyguard is dead and Mickey Wolfman is missing.
Yes.
And, it's almost like Doc was framed for this murder a little bit, and there's like police all around and stuff. And so he kind of gets taken in and questioned.
Yeah. No one like plants a gun on him or anything, but it's just him being unconscious at the scene of the crime. Mm-hmm. And in a part before this, a guy comes up to him, meets him in his office and wants him to track down Glenn Charlock, who is the bodyguard that ends up dead.
Yeah. And
this is kind of like part of this web that this story starts building.
Yes.
Is
the web.
The web is that, so many characters show up, so many characters that don't appear again.
Yeah, they have one scene where they're talking to Doc and they give him information and then they're gone.
Yeah. And sometimes that information matters. A lot of times it doesn't.
Yeah.
And it just keeps building all these connections.
Yeah.
Like this guy that showed up, Tyreek asked him to find Glenn, and then Glenn's the one who's dead. And it's like, what does that mean?
What's the connection there? Yeah, everything is tied together and it's a mess. So we're going to try to do our best here.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, it's going to sound like we probably don't know what we're talking about. But the purpose of the book in so many ways and the movie is to be so almost incomprehensible in terms of like
what's going on.
Yeah, there's so many connections, and it's not that there's a lack of information, there's too much.
Yeah.
And you're like, which connections matter, which ones don't, what's the motivation?
And you start feeling overwhelmed, kind of like Doc does, too.
Yeah.
You're like in his position where he's like, what is anything? Like, what's happening?
It does a good job because Doc is clearly overwhelmed and doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So you as the audience is put in that place. And it's interesting because Paul Thomas Anderson has said specifically about this movie that with movies, he's like, he doesn't really care about the plot a whole lot.
Yeah.
He cares about like characters and character moments and scenes. But in terms of like the overarching plot, he's kind of doesn't care about it.
Yeah. And I think in terms of like a character having an arc or characters interacting and something making sense for them and character development, I can see how that's important in this story. And those little tiny parts don't really make a difference. Like, does everything fall into place? No, but like that's life. Like not everything falls into place.
Yeah, and it works so well, especially in a noir detective story, because how oftentimes are you like following every detail and thread?
One clue leads to another, and then to another clue, and to another clue. You know, it's like that's not how it happens.
Whenever I enjoy a detective story, I just like the ride. I like the characters and the settings and the individual scenes. I don't care about, oh, he betrayed him and this and that. You know, so I thought this was really interesting, and it was a risky move by, I think, P.T. Anderson to adapt this and kind of really go with that.
Yeah.
Because I do think it turned a lot of people off.
I think so, too. The reactions to this movie were pretty mixed. A lot of audience members didn't like it, and some critics even were sort of mixed about it. But I think this is the type of movie, though, that is going to last.
I think so too.
Like, I think it'll develop a following and maybe become like a cult type movie.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the longer it's around, the more people will know what to expect from it.
Yeah.
You know,
and they're not going into it thinking that it's a Big Lebowski.
Yeah, because when we were going into it, I was able to warn you.
Yeah, no, I was like, I'm not going to know what anything is going on. I'm just going to like try my best. So, you know, I didn't have all these unrealistic expectations. I didn't think it was going to be like a romantic comedy, or I didn't think it was going to be like this adventure story. You know, I knew it was going to be kind of weird and wacky and out there. So
yeah. So back to the story. When Doc gets pulled in by the police after this incident, we meet Lieutenant Christian Bigfoot Bjornson. Bigfoot, as he's known, played by Josh Brolin.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm sorry, Joaquin Phoenix plays
Doc
in this movie, and he's amazing. I'm sure we'll talk about it more, and Josh Brolin plays Bigfoot. And so they have this whole past together where they're kind of frenemies.
Yeah.
And I really love their dynamic in this movie.
I do too. It's so fun.
Josh Brolin, or Bigfoot, is just constantly giving Doc shit about being a hippie. And he talks about, you know, I know you might have been taking a nap that's so important to the hippie lifestyle. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, always calling him like a dirty hippie and stuff. But they work together.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like, you know, he's questioning Doc at the beginning, but then they let him go because they know that he wasn't really involved. And then throughout the story, Doc keeps giving, you know, Bigfoot a call, or Bigfoot will call him, or they'll meet up and they'll just talk about what's going on in Doc's case and like what he's, you know, discovering, and they kind of work together. It's really cool dynamic because they are antagonists, but they also are like, okay, but we work together also.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell like there's so much push and pull. Like anytime they kind of get close to sharing like a real human emotion, they immediately like back off or give each other shit again. And it's probably the best dynamic of the whole movie. It's really great. So they let him go, and let's talk about Coy Harlingen.
Yes, who I thought his name was Corey at first, because I was like, who has the name Coy? But not like I'm judging the name Coy, but...
Well, also, like, everyone kind of mumbles a lot in this movie.
Yeah.
And talks kind of quietly sometimes.
Like, what are they saying? What? But Owen Wilson plays Coy.
Yeah, and he's great. I thought he was such a good casting choice for this.
And the way that Doc kind of gets thrown into the story is a woman calls him up and asks him to come visit because she has a case for him. And her name's Hope, and she's Coy's wife. And she's telling Doc how she found out that her husband was dead, but then she never saw a body, and so how she thinks he's really still alive and there's some kind of conspiracy going on. And it's so funny because she talks about how they used to be heroin users together and how they met in like a bathroom stall. And it's just like a very, really funny scene. And, you know, they have a child together now, and she's obviously become clean now. But she's really worried about Coy, and she wants Doc to look into his disappearance.
So Doc manages to track down Coy, or Coy actually kind of finds Doc. It's kind of a weird situation. And this is another one of those things that adds to like this paranoia of what's going on. Because Coy actually kind of manages to find Doc, and he's like, hey, I just want you to check in on my wife and my kid for me. I can't really see them. And Doc's like, yeah, sure, I can check in on them for you.
I don't know who you are.
So he agrees to do that, but he's talking to Coy, and we basically find out that Coy agreed to become a secret agent in a way, like a spy. Yeah, kind of a rat. And for this organization that he's kind of very mysterious on, where they faked his death for him, and then in the book they talk about like the training he got and stuff, and then they're kind of implanting him into different groups to kind of spy and become like one of them and report back. But it's this really kind of sad situation because he did it originally because he and his wife were both, you know, these drug addicts, and they weren't going anywhere. And he thought this would be like a fresh start, and it'd be better for them to just be apart because they were fueling each other's addiction.
Yeah.
But now that he's clean and he's out, and his wife Hope is clean, he's like, I really just want to be with them.
Yeah, and he's like, but I can't go back to them because I need to protect them because I'm involved in some heavy stuff and with some like crazy people, you know, so it's this kind of tough situation. But Coy like keeps popping up into the story. So all of these stories are going on like simultaneously, like the Mickey Wolfman case, you know, him trying to figure out where Shasta is, what happened to her and to Mickey, and looking into what, you know, everything with Coy. And that one guy that died, like everything is happening at the same time. Yeah,
and it's like so many of the plots interweave in certain ways.
Yeah.
That you're like, what's the connection here? I'm like not even sure, and it just kind of adds to this cluster cuss of a story, but it's really great for that.
Yeah, like almost not every scene, but there's so many scenes where Doc is like somewhere and he just sees Coy there, and he's just like.
And they'll just exchange a glance. And it happens so much in the book.
Really?
He'll just like, he's wandering down the street and he hears like saxophone music, and he walks into a club and there's Coy playing sax with a band. And they have like multiple conversations like throughout the story. They just kind of keep running into each other. So it's really interesting in that way.
Yeah, and so around this time that he starts meeting Coy, he also kind of finds out about this secret organization called Golden Fang. And, you know, people keep telling him to beware the Golden Fang, and he's like, what's the Golden Fang? And he kind of figures out that it's some kind of drug distribution gang cartel thing.
Well, first it's kind of revealed that it's a boat.
It's a boat, yeah.
It's this schooner out on the water that kind of comes in at night.
Yeah.
And like...
does its mysterious doings, and then leaves.
And so he's like, okay, and then he finds out it's actually importing heroin from the Bermuda Triangle. And then he finds out that it's it's an organization of dentists.
Yeah.
He shows up.
Get it? Golden Fang? Like cavities and like a filling.
Yeah. I think. But he shows up at this building that literally looks like a huge golden tooth or a golden pointed fang. And he walks in and it's has dentists in it. It's like, and this is where he talks to Dr. Rudy Blatnoyd, who is a crazy eccentric dentist.
Coke addicted.
Yeah.
In love with teenage girls.
Who are like clinically insane. Like literally like, you know.
Dentist.
Unhinged dentist. And, but so this is where he finds out that no, the Golden Fang is actually a syndicate of dentists who got together for tax reasons to like put their money in an offshore account. And it's like, okay, what?
Okay, what?
Huh? And so, and then finally, he goes to this psychiatric facility.
Rehab place
up north. And it's got a Spanish name that I don't remember, but it translates in Greek. Like, apparently it's also ancient Greek.
It's Spanish and Greek.
It translates to golden tooth. And so the Golden Fang is also this rehab clinic.
Yeah. And so he kind of makes the connection between like the drugs and then the rehab and then, you know, the dentistry, because Hope, Coy's wife, makes this comment to him when he's talking to her about how she got new teeth because heroin degrades your teeth.
Yeah.
And so he's like kind of putting together this plot to like get people addicted to heroin and then have them pay to get new teeth and then also like get them into rehab. So it's like this money scheme to kind of trap people.
And it's interesting because from what I've read that the Golden Fang is kind of supposed to just represent capitalism in general, because the book takes place in 1970. So kind of at this pivoting point of like the free-loving, hippie 1960s.
Is coming to an end.
Yeah, and then this kind of economic capitalist boom of the 70s. And so that's what the Golden Fang is kind of supposed to represent, this kind of like looming, ominous kind of presence that's kind of sweeping in
and kind of like taking control, you know, taking control of not only like someone falling down this addiction path, but then also even their path out of it too. So like that contributes to that paranoia feeling of like they're watching you and they know what you're doing and they're controlling everything.
It's all connected. Everyone's in on it.
Yeah, this scheme. And it's super interesting too because around this time was right after the Manson murders. And it's kind of this specific time in history. Obviously, we weren't there, but we've read and seen things about it. But kind of about people being really suspicious of hippie culture and sort of kind of more antagonistic toward them because of what happened, and it's sort of like turning the tide against that free love movement and kind of casting that darker shade onto it, and people sort of rejecting that a little bit now, and especially the police being suspicious of hippies and people that are still subscribing to that lifestyle.
So there's this paranoia on both sides of like the general public towards hippies, and then of like the hippie life style towards
like the government
and everything. And in the book, the FBI is a factor in this story. They kind of keep showing up.
Yeah.
And there's this group called Vigilant California, and you kind of find out they're the ones kind of in charge of Coy in a way, I think. Like I said, it gets so complicated. It's not clear
in the movie like who he's in with, but
and then the general police force, and these groups are so interconnected. The Golden Fang, the police, the FBI.
Yeah.
And you're like, who was hiring who and who was working with who?
Yeah.
And it connects it so much to the point they're like one entity almost. They're one big machine kind of that you can't even like pick apart. You know, you can't figure out the seams of.
Yeah.
So it's just it's very unique to this story, and I like it a lot.
Yeah. On the lighter edge, I guess not lighter, but a different edge of things. So, you know, Shasta kind of disappears throughout this, and then Doc is kind of looking for her and is trying to find out what happened because she disappeared. Mickey Wolfman disappeared, and, you know, some crazy stuff is going on. And you get the sense, like, throughout flashbacks and stuff that he's still really in love with her, which is kind of like this sweet story of how they used to be together and they were both like, you know, these really big hippies, and Shasta and him would just like have a good time and like hang out on the beach and smoke weed. And there's this really great scene where they're trying to find weed and they consult a Ouija board.
Yeah.
And then that leads them to a phone number, and then the phone number gives them an address, and then they go to the address and of course nothing's there. But it's this really cute scene of them where it's raining, they're running down the street, they're trying to find some weed, and then they end up just kind of like laughing in the street together in the rain, and it's so sweet.
Yeah.
And it's so sad because you can tell how much Doc misses her and how much he wants them to get back together, and how much he's worried about her because she's, you know, totally different than she used to be. She's in this consumerist, rich real estate, Mickey Wolfman's pocket now, and
Yeah.
he just like wants to make sure she's okay.
I think Shasta really represents like also this kind of change from the hippie lifestyle
Yeah.
to this kind of consumerist.
And
Because
getting caught up in that.
Yeah, because when she first shows up at the beginning of the story, Doc talks about her wearing this very fashionable kind of like mini dress. Kind
Yeah.
of her hair's different. And she looked how she swore she'd never look, he put it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but I really like their relationship in it, though. And I do love that flashback because I think a lot of times in stories like this,
Yeah.
they kind of go for the cheesy, silent flashback images of them laughing, these kind of close-up
Yeah.
shots that...
You're like, what does this mean?
Yeah,
This
what-
is just them laughing.
Okay, it looks happy, but it doesn't tell us anything.
Yeah.
But this kind of gave us a specific backstory and kind of told us what their life was like a little bit.
Yeah.
And I really liked that aspect of it.
Yeah. So she's still missing, and then he ends up tracking down Mickey Wolfman in the movie
Yeah.
at that spa. Like, what was that? The Golden Fang thing?
Yeah, I forget the name of it. Something
Something Spanish and Greek.
when someone was telling Doc about this place for the first time in the movie, he's writing in his notepad and she gives the name of it, the Spanish name, and Doc is writing it down. In this shot, the camera shows him writing, and he's literally writing just something Spanish. And that's the only note on the entire page.
It's
You just
just
wrote.
large something Spanish.
So he goes and kind of infiltrates this rehab facility.
Yeah.
And he does this a lot in the movie. He'll show up one place and say...
In the suit, his hair's
Yeah.
brushed back, so he's looking respectable.
He kind of wears disguises, and he says, I'm from such and such, and he's getting a tour of the facility, and he manages to kind of sneak away, and he notices the FBI there, and he finds Mickey Wolfman, and he manages to sneak up to talk to Mickey,
Yeah.
and Mickey's kind of in a haze.
Yeah. He's either like he's had a breakdown, or he's like being actively brainwashed in this like rehab clinic, cult rehab clinic. There's like all these like ritual type things there too. And he just talks to Doc about how he was like going to give his money away or something, and now he's here. And you're like, did his wife put him in this place because he was going to give away their money? Like, is it her conspiracy? Is it
Yeah.
the government? Like, who's orchestrating this? But it plays out a lot differently in the book, right?
Yeah, so in the book, there's a whole section where Doc goes to Las Vegas. He meets this woman who is trying to track down another one of Mickey Wolfman's bodyguards named Puck Beaverton. And she thinks he's in Vegas, and so Doc also needs to go to Vegas. I can't even specifically remember why. He wants to find Puck too, though, so that's
Yeah.
part of it. So they go to Vegas, and while he's at a casino, he's looking for Puck to meet Puck, and then he runs into Mickey Wolfman, and has all these FBI bodyguards around him, and they're kind of sweeping him away. And Doc's just like kind of stunned, like
Yeah.
what is Mickey doing here? And the FBI knows where he is because he's been missing this whole time supposedly.
Yeah.
And soon after returning from this trip, Mickey reemerges. He kind of shows up again in the public eye. And so does Shasta around the same time.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, and it's similar in the movie after Doc finds him at this clinic and has this discussion with him shortly after he kind of reemerges.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of interesting whole a lot happens in this Las Vegas part in the book.
Yeah.
And I liked that part a lot. It was a good part of the book, but I can get why P.T. Anderson maybe wanted to keep it in the LA region.
Yeah. And it probably seemed at that point like you're already halfway through the story and then you're going to have them like start this road trip, like, take them out of it instead of like starting to wrap up what's happening.
Mm-hmm. So this is when Shasta returns.
Yeah.
In a
very, very unexpected
bizarre way.
Yeah. And you're like, as I was watching it, I was like, is this real? Like I was, taking notes because we take notes when we watch the movies. And I was like, Shasta's back? Like question mark? I had a lot of question marks in my notes. I was like, what's happening? I don't know. But yeah, I was like, I bet this is a dream or a hallucination or something. But she's back and she just shows up at Doc's apartment, and it's just like, hey.
He's kind of stunned too, but he's like, hey, what's going on? This whole time he's thought, is she on the Golden Fang, the boat? Like, where is she? Is she safe? Is she alive?
Mm-hmm. How is she involved in all of these plots? Because everyone talks about how Shasta's involved and Shasta's in on like all of this. And then she shows up and she's just sort of like, yeah, I was away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's like, I went up north to see my parents or like to see family about stuff.
Yeah.
And Doc kind of doesn't question it. He's like, okay, that's super weird. And it's also interesting because now she looks more like how she used to, how she was described to. Mm-hmm. And but still acting kind of bizarre.
Yeah, she acts super weird. And this leads us to a really extended sexual scene. Yes. It's kind of awkward and uncomfortable. And
we should make a jingle for when we have to talk about really long,
uncomfortable sex scenes. Yeah, so she like kind of reappears in the shot and she's naked. And, she clearly wants to have sex with Doc, but Doc is reluctant, mostly because he wants to find out what's happening and like what had happened. And, what she's even doing. And
she's almost kind of using herself to kind of like
deflect the conversation.
Yes, to kind of ignore his questions about what's going on.
Yeah, she's like, or you could have sex with me. We don't have to talk, and she's sort of like really, kind of all up on him in a lot of ways.
And she goes on this whole tangent about when she was with Mickey.
Yeah.
And he used to take her out and force her to wear really short mini dresses and kind of
pimp her out to his
pimp
friends.
her out to friends and flaunt her around,
and she would have to like go with them and kind of it's very disturbing to hear her talk about it because it's this controlling relationship where she can't say no to him or to the guys that he pawns her off on. And she talks too about how she kind of liked feeling invisible with him.
Yeah.
Like he didn't see her, or maybe he saw her as more of an object and so kind of treated her like nothing, and part of her liked that. And so that kind of ties into maybe like some self-hatred or some, sadistic type,
Yeah, because
wanting to punish herself maybe.
Because as she's telling this to Doc, she's literally crawling over his lap naked, and she's like, wouldn't you just want to like punish the person who broke your heart and ran away with this like millionaire? And this is where Doc like slaps her ass like a bunch of times and then has really aggressive sex with her.
Yeah, and it's like it's clearly meant to be kind of this sad and uncomfortable scene.
Yeah.
It's like there's something wrong with Shasta, and obviously the stuff that happened to her isn't just going to go away, and she's still feeling the effects of being with this Mickey Wolfman guy and kind of the culture that she was in, which I would argue that this type of culture, treats women as, commodities or objects.
Yeah.
And we get that a lot. And like, there's a scene where Doc is at Mickey Wolfman's house, and Mickey Wolfman isn't there because he's missing, but he sees his wife and kind of like they're having this party and everyone's all sexy and they're like, sex is happening all the time. We're like, okay, we get it. But kind of like this culture and this idea and like that the tie between capitalism and misogyny and using women, I'm getting like super deep here into like capitalist, theory, but tying that to, money and then also using women as objects. And Shasta is like just now coming out of that. So part of her is still troubled, obviously.
Yeah. And it's the dialogue is almost verbatim from the book.
Yeah.
The whole scene, and so much of the dialogue of this story is verbatim from the book.
Really?
The opening scene and like, this scene where she's talking about what Mickey used to do to her. Mm-hmm. But it's unique to the movie that it takes this speech of hers and keeps the dialogue the same, but it just comes across so much more sad in the movie. I think because of the performance, and the music is very sad, if that makes sense. Like the music kind of really adds to this weird feeling and tone.
The actress is really good. Is it Catherine Watterson?
Yes. Something like that.
Yeah. But she's really good, and she really plays this, especially this scene, really well.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that ends, and you're just like, okay.
it was it's just very, for a movie that's relatively, it's been goofy at points and laugh out loud funny at points and very eerie at points. But this was the most kind of disturbing or catches you off guard moment in the movie.
Yeah, it makes you feel uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah, very much so.
Because like it's sexual, and it's supposed to be kind of erotic, but at the same time it's like, oh, this is clearly like not a good thing for her or for him. Like this is a bad moment between them.
In the book, he specifically describes her as seeming like the old Shasta. So in that context, it really does seem like maybe she's just kind of being
trying to get back to herself, maybe.
Yeah. Or kind of role playing the situation. It's definitely more of just a sex thing, it seems, than this like sad cry for help almost. So this kind of kicks us into the third act.
Yeah.
Which the movie does a good job of kind of setting up. We haven't talked about the narrator.
Oh, yeah. So it's super interesting because there's this female character who is like a friend of Doc's who narrates the whole movie. And I'm guessing that her dialogue is from the book.
Yeah, so this is P.T. Anderson talked about. He wanted a narrator because he really wanted to keep a lot of the lines or I don't know the term for it. Not the dialogue, but just the writing.
The narration.
The writing from the book that wasn't dialogue. And so he decided to include a narrator. And in the book, there is this side character named Liege who is super into astrological signs and karma and astrology and things like that. And she becomes the narrator in the movie, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, and it's really cool because she's talking about the scenes and the characters and what's going on. And she even appears in some scenes with Doc. But it's like the type of scenes and the type of way that she interacts with him where, in my mind anyway, she's completely imaginary.
Yeah.
Like she's not a real character in the story.
At least not at this point. Because there is a part where when they did the Ouija board, she was there.
Yeah.
And Doc either mentions her to Shasta or Shasta mentions Liege. So I think Liege is a person.
But not in the sense that... Because there's some shots of her where she'll be in Doc's car kind of talking and narrating. And then in the next shot, he'll just be alone in the car. Yeah. So you're like, is this his conscience? Is this like, is she kind of serving as his guardian angel a little bit, in this story? I don't know. I like it though.
I do too. I like her
more of the mystery.
Yeah. And her voiceovers and like keeping some of Pynchon's. Yeah. Especially when he's talking about like karmic thermals and astrological
and the horoscopes and
I really like those parts of the narration.
So the narrator actually kind of helps Doc decide what to do, because we talked about earlier how everything is connected. There's so many webs and plots and groups that are like all connected, and it seems like a mess, and Doc cannot sort it out. And so the narrator there's this scene with her and him where she's like, what couldn't you live with if you like end all this? What's the one thing that you want to fix in this whole situation? And Doc's kind of like, oh, I want to help Coy. Like, I don't care about all this other stuff with Mickey. I don't care
the
about
Golden Fang,
the Golden
and the
Fang.
FBI.
Like, I don't care. I just want to help Koi. So that gives him this drive, and this drives the whole third act of the movie.
Yeah, and I like that kind of decision to
Yeah.
help Koi and kind of abandon. Now, these elements still kind of come up a little bit,
Yeah.
like the Golden Fang and
can't
stuff.
escape it.
No. But I do like that part of it, and it helps establish the third act better than like the book does.
Yeah,
you know?
and it gives us purpose in following the story because we're like, oh yeah, like Koi, yes, let's help Koi, you know.
And it kind of helps refocus the audience too. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's
you're
almost
like, what is happening?
Okay, forget kind of everything else. Let's just focus on Koi right now.
Yeah, so he kind of figures out that when Koi's death was faked, they faked an overdose, and the heroin that was used to fake the overdose, he kind of tracks down to this Adrian Prussia character.
Yeah, who's kind of a loan shark, and he goes to the assistant DA who he's kind of dating.
Oh, yeah.
In this story, who is played by Reese Witherspoon, who's great. There's
She's
so
great.
many big names in this movie. It's
I
crazy.
know, yeah.
Benicio del Toro is also in it as a lawyer.
Yeah,
who,
his lawyer friend.
Yeah, who helps him out. And so he manages to get the jacket or the case files on Adrian Prussia.
Yeah.
And kind of finds out he's been like almost like a hitman for the LAPD.
Yeah.
Where he commits these crimes and they kind of turn their back.
Uh-huh. And it never goes to court, you know, and all these prosecutions don't really happen.
Yeah, and he discovers that he was responsible for killing Bigfoot's partner.
Yeah.
And this kind of explains a lot to Doc because Bigfoot has kind of been a little erratic and a little emotional at points that Doc kind of says is unlike him.
Yeah.
And he hasn't had a partner for a little while now, apparently, but...
And wants to work alone now, doesn't want a new partner, probably because he was so traumatized by his partner's death.
Yeah, and Doc kind of realizes he's still in mourning a bit. So he goes just straight to the source. He goes to visit Adrian Prussia.
Yeah.
And who's Adrian Prussia? I wrote it down. Adrian Prussia is played by Peter McRobbie. The old Peter McRobbie.
Nice.
But no, he's the pastor or the father in the Daredevil TV series. He's really good in this role. I liked him a lot. And Adrian has this office filled with baseball bats. It's so cool. It's kind of a thing of his. And Doc sits down with him, and Adrian kind of brushes him off, and then
Puck Beaverton enters.
Puck Beaverton, who we only know as the guy with the swastika tattoo on his face, and Puck he lights up a joint and gives it to Doc.
Yeah.
And Doc, being Doc, like doesn't even think and takes it and like starts, taking hits off it.
And of course gets totally drugged and passes out. And when he comes to, he's like handcuffed to this wall, and Puck Beaverton has him in this room and basically kind of says that he's going to kill him.
Yeah. He tells Doc that they just got a shipment of new heroin in.
Yeah.
Like pure Chinese white, whatever it's called. And they're going to overdose him.
So the same way that they faked Koi's death, they're
Yeah.
going to do the same thing to him.
And so he leaves, and Doc's freaking out, but he manages to pull out a shiv, or not a shiv, a sliver of
a credit card,
which he's able to undo his cuffs with.
Yeah. And then he grabs what is it, like the lid of a toilet?
Yeah, the lid of a toilet.
He grabs the lid of a toilet and then hits Puck Beaverton over the head when he comes in the door. And then they end up in this big fight scene.
This is what I love about Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
He's the most physical actor, especially in like P.T. Anderson movies that I've seen.
Yeah.
He in The Master specifically, he gets into a couple of fights, and I'm like, he's really like getting slapped around in the face by this guy.
Yeah, it's an intense fight.
It is, and I love Joaquin Phoenix for that reason. He's so good.
And then he injects the heroin into Puck Beaverton. That was meant for him.
Yes, it's a great way to finish him off. And then right when he does that, the door opens and Adrian Prussia walks in, and Doc manages to grab the pistol off Puck Beaverton. I said Buck for a second. And he shoots Adrian.
Yeah.
And it leads to my favorite line in the whole movie, where after he shoots in Adrian's direction and the door closes again and he can't see Adrian, he gets up and he's looking and he's all frantic and he yells down, he's like, "Did I get you?" And it's just dead silence, because when he gets to the bottom of the steps, Adrian's dead.
Yeah, and he gets down there and Bigfoot's there.
Yeah.
And so it's like, was Bigfoot setting him up, or like, did Bigfoot kind of lead him there so he could get in there? You don't really know.
Yeah, so Bigfoot is stealing a bunch of the heroin.
Yeah.
And Doc's telling him it's not a good idea. Mm-hmm. And, Bigfoot just kind of brushes him off.
Yeah.
And Bigfoot drives him to
back to his house.
To his car.
Oh, yeah, back to his car.
Because they impounded his car. Mm-hmm. And when he lets him off, Doc kind of gets this eerie sense of like something's not right. Mm-hmm. And he opens up the trunk and finds Bigfoot had put a bunch of the heroin in his car.
Yeah.
Like 10 big cubes, like bundles of heroin.
And he's like, oh shit.
I'm not entirely sure
what the purpose of that was.
Yeah. I don't think he wanted to set up Doc to be. Maybe he did. Maybe he did want Doc to fall, to take the fall for everything.
I don't know.
I'm not entirely sure. The book almost alluded to that. I mean, I'm sure it said it more specifically and I just kind of forgot, but that it was so he could like follow Doc to figure out who hired Adrian, because he's still trying to like get the guy who's the most responsible
for his partner's death.
Mm-hmm. And can we take a sidebar real quick?
Yeah.
And talk about the cinematography in this movie?
Absolutely.
Because...
well, just that shot at the beginning of the ocean between those two buildings.
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful, and it's just like the city and the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so much of the cinematography in this is gorgeous. And, there's a lot of debate, I think, between filmmakers about whether they use real film or digital film. And usually it's like, you can't freaking tell. Like,
yeah.
I don't, like, who cares?
It doesn't matter.
You can't tell. But this is one of the few movies we're watching, and I'm like, I feel like I can totally tell this was on real film. Unless they did some post thing
editing
to it.
Thing, yeah.
But it was actually, I think, filmed on real film. And it's really beautifully shot and, like, naturally lit. Mm-hmm. Where... it doesn't feel like there's any lights set up, really. Yeah. And, like, all the natural lighting that's used is, like, from outside. But I sometimes wondered if it fit.
Yeah.
This aesthetic.
Really?
Yeah, because for a movie that's so kind of goofy and heightened and crazy
you
and
expect
weird.
It to be, like, neon-y.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. And it was so naturalistic that I was like, I'm not sure if the tone of the cinematography fits with this movie.
I kind of liked it. I didn't it's hard for me to explain because I just don't have that experience and that knowledge of cinematography, but I liked the look of it and I liked the feeling that it gave to the story. Like, I really enjoyed that.
Well, and it's beautifully shot. Like, the cinematography is, I think, inarguably, like, great. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of back and forth. I'm like, well, why can't a movie that's really funny be shot beautifully like this, you know? And it's not that it can't. I was just like, I don't know if I'm getting the right feeling from it or not. I think ultimately I do like it.
Yeah.
I'm not, like, against it, but it's just different. Mm-hmm. Speaking of cinematography, at this point in the movie, we have one of my favorite shots where after Doc finds the heroin, it cuts to him, a shot of him in his kitchen, and he's flanked on either side by just two huge stacks, like comically huge stacks of, like, packaged heroin. And he's just kind of sitting there like,
what do I do?
Yeah, staring into the abyss about it.
And he ends up making this deal with the Golden Fang heroin organization to kind of trade off the heroin. So he meets with this lawyer guy that he kind of had business with before. Mm-hmm. And they kind of make a deal, and he's like, what do you want in exchange? And Doc's like, I just want Coy to be able to, like, get out of everything he's involved in and go back to his family.
And they were like, oh yeah, sure, that's a lot cheaper than what we thought we were gonna have to pay for this.
And he's like, but I could also have money? And they're like, yeah, no.
And so this leads to Doc picking up Coy from the rehab facility where he was undercover at that point, and he takes him home. And this is such a great scene. I really loved this scene.
I do too.
Doc is dropping Coy off at his house.
Yeah.
And Coy tells him, he's like, you know what that Native American's saying about, you saved my life, so now you're responsible for me.
Yeah. And Doc's just kind of like, oh, that's bullshit, man. Like,
some hippie made that up.
yeah.
But I love his reply. He's like, you saved your own life.
Yeah.
Now go live it. And so we get this really, I love the music in it, and like the shot it pans out.
And then he goes, like, knocks on the door, and you just see him and Hope like hugging, and then you can see them in the window, and like it's just really sweet. It's not like too cheesy, you know, because you don't see them like, oh, and they're kissing and it's sweeping music, but it's just like, you know, it's this new beginning for them, and you know, and they're both clean, and they have this daughter, and you know, they both wanted to be reunited with each other, and now they are. And Doc kind of feeling like he did something good. Yeah.
And it goes back to that third act point where he decides Coy's what's important. And it is good that we get like this kind of very human resolution to the story outside of all the crazy drug
wacky
FBI craziness. You know, we get this kind of human resolution at the end, which I really enjoyed. So following this scene, we get our favorite scene in the movie.
Maybe our favorite scene. Probably our favorite scene.
Where Doc is back home. He's rolling up some joints. And by the way, if anyone's confused, the reason he's called Bigfoot is he's notorious for kicking in doors.
Yeah.
And so who kicks in his door but Bigfoot? And he just kicks it like it falls flat down, and he like stomps on it and like breaks all the glass out of the door.
Yeah.
And he sits across from Doc.
Yeah, and he's just sort of like, why haven't you called me?
Well, pretty much. It's great, though, because it starts off with them saying, they start repeating the exact same lines at the same time, where they're like, hey, sorry about last night. Wait, why are you sorry? Wait, weird.
Like they were, saying it, jinxing.
But it's cool because they've had like 3 phone calls up until this point with each other.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this till I read it, but it makes sense that while they're on the phone with each other, they're oftentimes mirroring each other's environment or situation. So in one scene, Doc's smoking a joint and and Bigfoot's drinking whiskey.
Yeah.
Or in another scene, Shasta is walking around the apartment while Doc's on the phone, and Bigfoot's wife is walking around their home while he's on the phone. And so it kind of culminates in this scene where they're literally mirroring or repeating each other's words back to each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's just kind of like, I thought you would call and I haven't heard from you. And then he just like takes Doc's joint and eats it.
He takes a puff of it first, and Doc's kind of watching in amazement, and then he just folds it up and eats it. And then he takes Doc's
bowl of weed,
entire tray of like cut up or ground up weed, and just dunks the entire thing into it. He just like upends the tray into his mouth. Eats all of Doc's weed in front of him.
And this is bizarre scene, and like Doc is like staring at him, and it's this like these close-up shots of each other like on their faces, and Doc starts like crying, like some tears are rolling down his face, and you're like, what is happening?
and it's funny because it's so bizarre, but you kind of get I get what Doc's feeling. Doc feels bad about Bigfoot and his partner and him being in mourning.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because I think Bigfoot is on one level trying to like come down to Doc's level with
and connect with him a bit.
Yeah, by smoking the joint. And then I don't know if he was eating the weed to also do that, but it's ironic because he's just kind of destroying it at the same time. Yeah. And then it does end on kind of a melancholy note because I think Bigfoot says, "You're not my brother."
Yeah.
And Doc says, "But you need a keeper." And Bigfoot just kind of wanders out of, wanders out of the apartment, and it is kind of this sad, kind of unresolved feeling with Bigfoot, but that I really liked a lot.
Me too. Yeah, and then the last scene is Doc and Shasta kind of driving away in a car together and just sort of talking and just being like, Shasta saying how it feels like it used to feel with them and how it just feels like it's the two of them together. And then that's kind of the end. Yeah,
they're driving through the fog. And it's interesting because the book the setup is like almost the exact same, but it's only Doc. It's Doc in the car driving through the fog, and it's this really great part of him describing these cars kind of like huddled in lines as they drive through the fog, kind of for like to watch out for each other almost. Like they're kind of like a caravan kind of making their way through. And he talks about like not being able to see the exits, and if he can't find his exit, he'll just keep going. And I really like the way the book ends, but it does kind of leave his relationship with Shasta more open-ended.
And this one still kind of is like, you know, they have this line where they're like, this doesn't mean we're back together, but it's said with kind of like a wink. You know? It's like, this doesn't mean we're back together, you know, but
and the book has the same line at that scene. So it's also tough to tell, did she mean that sincerely, or is it the same thing as it kind of with a wink? So that's the end of the story. It was
a ride.
It was. The book, I really enjoyed the book. And I guess I should just get into which is better.
I mean, I can't really say because I haven't read the book, but I'm going to say that the movie is better.
Really?
I can't really say, but I'm going to. I like, from what you've said, even just in this conversation about how, you know, the Coy storyline is sort of more resolved and kind of more of an emotional thing for Doc in the movie. And then how the Shasta is a little bit more of a complete story too, and kind of the characterization that they give her a little bit, that, you know, not everything is happy-go-lucky with her, like she's got some stuff going on. I just liked it, and I liked the feel of it and the look of the movie, and it gave you a feeling, and it was something that I thought about even after I had finished watching it. So I really enjoyed it.
I'm really glad you liked it, because I did not know
what I would react
when we were going to watch it. I was not sure whether you were going to like the movie or not. So I'm really glad you did. This is tough for me, but I think I might say the book.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know,
we're opposites on this one.
I know. Well,
I mean, I didn't read the book.
You did not, so your opinion goes that far. But the book is really, really funny. It's a really funny book. Like, it's got a lot of stoner humor, and I really love the writing in it. Thomas Pynchon's descriptions and everything are so kind of vivid, and it really helps bring you into this, like the setting of the 1970s. And I enjoyed it. It does drag at points. It is a little bit tough at points to get through. Sometimes the description gets a little bit too much, and it's a very bizarrely written at points. He writes in a lot of run-on sentences, kind of. And sometimes partway through, you don't even know what you're reading. How you
started.
You don't even know what the point of the sentence is or where it's going, which, you know, adds to the feel for sure, but does become challenging at points. So it does lose some points in that regard, I think. But overall, I rarely laugh out loud at books. But there were so many moments in this that I was like cracking up at. And the tone of the movie is really interesting, and I like it. But it's also very just super strange between like the weird paranoia and kind of the one, you know, the dramatic Shasta scene. I shouldn't say dramatic, but the weird Shasta scene. And the book is a little more even in a way, in terms of just being kind of like a fun romp. But, you know, sometimes it does get too much into pop culture. He talks a lot about music sometimes, and it's like a little bit too much.
And you're like, what is this?
But I found the book really rewarding, and I liked reading it. So I will say the book.
Oh, great. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I love when we disagree.
Did I shock you? Are you shocked?
No, I'm not shocked. And I can understand where you're coming from with that, especially in a book like that where you feel accomplished, or a sense of accomplishment when you finish reading that. Like, there's nothing... I mean, you might have mixed feelings about a book, but when you have that sense of accomplishment in reading it, you're always going to be proud of yourself for reading it, and you're going to have, you know, positive emotions attached to the book.
I'll feel more accomplished if I read another one of his books, like V or something.
Gravity's Rainbow.
Probably never, but
yeah, I don't know if I want to attempt that either. I don't know if I want to do that to myself.
Yeah.
Oh, an interesting theme that I wanted to talk about is entropy. And, so I was reading about Thomas Pynchon, and he writes a lot about entropy, which is kind of the inevitable decline and destruction and disintegration of everything, including the universe. And the term inherent vice is basically kind of another term for that. Sort of, it's like a legal clause, and also it's sort of like a book binding or an archivist or preservationist term saying that it's an inherent vice, which is like the very thing that creates something is what will also destroy it. Like how eggs will just eventually go rotten, how paper eventually disintegrates, how everything sort of decays, and how you can't really cover that in insurance and from a legal standpoint because like that's just the natural state of things. And that's kind of a really interesting and common theme in Thomas Pynchon's work, and it is a little bit in this book too, and in movie with the decline of the 60s and this coming new era.
Yeah.
But eventually, we know reading in 2017 that era fades as well, and so it's just kind of like the decline and renewal of everything.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too because the book, in a lot of ways, it talks about like the future.
Yeah.
And in the book, there's a guy he goes to see named Fritz, I believe, who has this computer set up. And it's this kind of archaic old system, but he could like access information from different universities and things.
Yeah.
And, he talked a lot about like, oh, this is the future, man. Like, this is where it's all going. And at one point, like right near the end of the book, Doc talks about like, oh, I wonder if in the future every car will have a phone. And or even a computer in it, and so it's
it's self-aware in that way.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, like talking about inherent vice and the decay of stuff, but also the birth of new things.
Yeah,
which we know will eventually decay themselves.
Yeah,
and so it's kind of this cyclical nature almost. Yeah.
Lightning round. Okay, so neo-Nazis are a big theme in the book, and they keep popping up, and in the movie as well. And it's so funny because it's almost like Thomas Pynchon and P.T. Anderson are like subverting Nazi tropes in this. And so we already talked about how the neo-Nazis are guarding a Jewish man and how they're just working with him and kind of working for him. And then also one of the neo-Nazis was a good friend of this African-American guy in jail and was actually like, they were friends. So that's kind of subverting.
And they were doing business together.
So he's going to like provide guns or something for him. And then there's this other character who is supposed to be bisexual, and he's also neo-Nazi. So it's like the things that the Nazis are against, which are like Jews, African Americans, and homosexuals. They're kind of like,
it's almost like they have no
reason to be Nazis.
Yeah.
And there's this really great scene where Doc goes to that spa rehab place, and we mentioned it, where he's like, does that guy have a swastika tattoo on his face? And he sort of asks the leader of the spa, and he's like, is that a swastika on that man's face? And the spa guy is like, no, it isn't, baby. And then he's like, it's an ancient Hindu symbol meaning all is well. And Doc is like, okay.
And I love the guy's face when he's like, no, it isn't, because he's just like kind of sweating.
Trying to like play it off like that's not a swastika on a guy's face.
Because he just looks like a prison thug. It's so funny. Okay, so this book is so funny, and I really wanted to read part of it just to like convey the humor of it, especially the stoner humor.
Yeah.
So this was my favorite part, or one of them. It's the character played by Benicio del Toro in the movie, who
is his lawyer friend.
Yeah, Sancho, who's his lawyer friend. And in the book, he's constantly getting stoned and calling Doc, especially about TV and commercials that he's freaking out about. So he calls Doc and he says, "Charlie the fucking tuna, man." What? "It's all supposed to be so innocent. Upwardly mobile snob, designer, shades, beret, so desperate to show he's got good taste. Except he's also dyslexic, so he gets good taste mixed up with taste good. But it's worse than that. Far, far worse. Charlie really has this, like, Like obsessive death wish. Yes, but he wants to be caught, processed, put in a can, but not just any can, you dig. It has to be star-kissed, suicidal brand loyalty, man. Deep parable of consumer capitalism. They won't be happy with anything less than drift netting us all, chopping us and stacking us on shelves of supermarket America, and subconsciously, the horrible thing is we want them to do it. Sanch, wow, it's been on my mind. And another thing, why is there chicken of the sea, but no tuna of the farm? Doc actually beginning to think about this. And don't forget, Sancho went on to remind him darkly, that Charles Manson and the Viet Cong are also named Charlie.
It's a great rant about Starkist tuna.
There's so many great, like, kind of just these ranting, like, ramblings of people high on weed in this story. It's so funny.
So there's these great parts in the movie where Bigfoot is always eating these frozen and chocolate covered bananas. So there's this great shot of Doc is in the passenger seat of the car with Bigfoot, and it's just sideways view of Bigfoot, and you can just see him like just his mouth all up on this frozen banana. And just like, there's a part too where he's kind of like, he almost like kind of chokes on it. And it's just like 30 seconds. And you can see in the background Doc's face, like staring at him, just like, what is happening? And it's just obviously very homosexual kind of referring, but it's so funny.
The moment where he kind of like gags for a minute on it is so funny. Oh my God. There's so many little subplots and moments in this story, like, and so many more in the book that just add to this confusing plot line.
Yeah.
And one of them is, they discover that where the Golden Fang had been in the water, they discover a packet, like a box, a steel box deep in the ocean. Uh-huh. And they end up pulling it up and they discover it's full of fake money. Different denominations, but in each...
Like Monopoly money?
Well, it's like really, really accurate.
Oh, okay.
To American money, except it has Richard Nixon's face on it. And it's interesting because they talk about, like, this is actually a tactic used by governments when they want to disrupt the economy of another country.
Huh.
They'll actually, like, produce fake money of that country and, like, introduce it into their economy, like, secretly. So
yeah.
So no one notices and they're paying with it and it's getting, like, into their system of money, and it kind of disrupts their economy. And so they're like, is the Golden Fang trying to do this to America? Like, what's the purpose of this?
Yeah.
And the money comes up later, but not explained at all. And it's one example of 50...
A plot that goes nowhere.
Yeah.
No wonder P.T. Anderson didn't use it.
I know.
Oh, so there's this other character who we mentioned briefly, Penny, who's the assistant district attorney, who Doc is kind of sleeping with. And she's so great. She's played by Reese Witherspoon. And she's kind of like this straight-laced, kind of uptight district attorney woman who kind of like is always dissing Doc and is just like mean to him. But then like they sleep together and there's this great scene where kind of she comes over, he calls her and asks her to come over and she's like, fine. And then you just see them like they've clearly already have sex and you can see her like smoking a joint and they're like just chilling and eating and like her hair is down. She's just like so relaxed and it's so cool to see that side of her. And I just loved her character.
Yeah, I love that duality to her in the book and the movie. That she kind of has this like wilder side that she likes
to spend that time with Doc and kind of let loose a bit.
Yeah, it's great. So that wraps up our lightning round.
Wraps
I think.
It up. Yeah.
There's so many parts to this book I could mention, and there's parts of the movie that we could mention.
There's a million side plots, I'm sure.
Yeah. But it's a good book and a good movie. I think everyone should check out either.
Yeah, as long as you know what you're going into when you start watching it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, if you want to follow us on social media,
yes.
You can follow us on Twitter at covered2credits. That's the number 2. Mm-hmm. We're on Facebook. You can email us at coveredcreditspod@gmail.com.
Yep.
And leave us an iTunes review.
The reviews are great.
Yes.
Or leave us a review on whatever service you use to listen to your podcast. Leave us a review on Facebook. Just leave us a review.
Yeah, even just a star rating. It all helps.
Mm-hmm.
And that wraps it up for us this episode.
Yep. It was a fun time in LA in the 1970s with you all.
Oh, and we forgot to mention that we will be going to LA.
Oh, yeah, we're about to go to LA.
We'll be in LA.
We'll be living that life.
When we release this episode.
Yeah.
So we're going to be firsthand experiencing that area. We totally planned it out. Definitely.
To do it this way. No, we didn't.
No.
But it's kind of cool. It got us in the mood to, you know, experience LA, and I'm really excited.
It makes me more excited to go. We'll take photos and probably post them on Twitter and stuff. And if we have any Inherent Vice connections, we'll certainly post about it.
So, yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.